50,000 Philippine pesos, around $900, was the price on someone's head. More specifically, that was the reward for murdering a woman, stuffing her inside a drum, filling it with cement, placing it inside a steel case, and then dumping it in the sea to ensure no one would ever find her. That is until someone came forward 2 years later, confessed to the murder, and revealed exactly where to find the missing woman. He also claimed that it was the woman's husband and his rich, powerful family who orchestrated the killing, all because of a custody battle. This is the tragic story of Ruby Rose Barrameda. On June 10, 2009, a large steel box was fished out of the sea in Navotas City, national capital region of the Philippines. The police were led to the location by a witness who came forward to confess that a missing woman had been dumped there. He was part of the group that killed her. Former beauty queen and Filipina actress Rochelle Barrameda was beginning to believe in the concept of a perfect crime, since it had been 2 years since her sister, Ruby Rose Barrameda, had gone missing. Various authorities led investigations, all seemingly pointing to the same suspects, yet there were no solid leads. That is until Manuel Montero surrendered to the police and led them right to Ruby's body, which was cemented inside a drum and dumped a few kilometers from the shore. The recovery officially ended the family's 2-year search, but it was a shock for the Barramedas to see Ruby's grisly fate. She was seemingly tortured before she died. Her hands and feet were tied and handcuffed. A rope was wrapped around her neck, and her whole face was covered with tape. There were bruises all over her body, and she was strangled to death. In the crime lab where they opened the steel case, Rochelle identified her sister by her clothes: khaki slacks, a striped shirt, a bra, and even her earrings. The police ran a forensic analysis matching Ruby's DNA and dental records to the victim. Montero said that she was already dead when they placed her in the drum and poured cement over her. He was able to pinpoint the exact location of the body, lending credibility to his confession. He added that he was the one who poured the cement in the drum and welded the steel case. He also disclosed those allegedly involved in the murder. A case was filed against 7 suspects, the masterminds: Manuel Jimenez Jr., Ruby's father-in-law, his brother Lope Jimenez, and 5 others. The Barrameda family suspected that Ruby's husband, Manuel Jimenez III, commonly known as Third, had something to do with the killing and filed a parricide case against him. Ruby's husband denied any involvement, but the Barrameda family's lawyer argued that it would be impossible not to know what was happening around you. I mean, your dad, your uncle, your bodyguard, the driver, everyone in your inner circle is involved, and yet you're not. It didn't make any sense. It had been 2 years since his wife went missing, yet he did nothing to search for her. Rochelle added that the Barrameda family had no enemies and lived a simple life. She knew many people were jealous that Ruby married a wealthy man, but now she wishes her sister hadn't married such a monster, a family capable of such an inhumane act. But the Jimenez family denied all allegations. They were ready to fight to be absolved of all charges and clear their name despite the overwhelming evidence. So let's take a look at what happened to Ruby. Around 9 a.m. on March 14, 2007, 27-year-old Ruby was anxious and worried at her home in Moonwalk Village, Las Piñas City. That morning, she had just received a court order that quashed her motion for a temporary protection order in her custody battle with her husband. The court granted sole custody of their 2 daughters to her husband, much to Ruby's alarm, especially since her domestic abuse complaint was also dismissed. Earlier that year, Ruby and her husband, Third, decided to part ways due to irreconcilable differences. After the split, Ruby filed for temporary custody of their daughters, who were 7 years old and 3 months old at the time. Unfortunately for Ruby, the court favored Third for sole custody, leading her to file a temporary protection order to see her daughters despite not having custody. In the Philippines, no child under 7 years of age shall be separated from their mother unless the court finds compelling reasons to order otherwise. Ruby was still breastfeeding her youngest when her children were separated from her. According to Rochelle, Ruby reached out to her lawyer after receiving the court order and then went to the bank. Around 2 p.m., she headed to see her daughters at Third's family home in BF Homes in Barrameda City. At 4 p.m., Rochelle received a call from Ruby's friend asking about her whereabouts because Ruby wasn't answering calls. Rochelle tried calling her, but got no response. She then asked her maid to contact the Jimenez household to confirm if Ruby was still there. Third's father, attorney Manuel Jimenez Jr., answered the maid's call and said Ruby wasn't there. Rochelle tried to reach out to Third, but he wasn't answering either. Ruby failed to return home that day and was never seen or heard from again. Rochelle reported her disappearance to the police, knowing that if something happened to her sister, the custody battle was likely the reason. The Barrameda family asserted that it couldn't be a coincidence that Ruby disappeared 2 days before a scheduled hearing on her motion for reconsideration regarding the court's decision granting custodial rights to her husband. After all, she was supposed to take the stand for cross-examination. According to Rochelle, Ruby lived with her husband's family for 7 years and treated them like her own. The Jimenezes were an affluent family. Third's father, attorney Manuel Jimenez Jr., owned several businesses, including fishing and agricultural companies, farmlands, and several gas stations. Lope, Third's uncle and a fishing magnate, owned Buena Suerte Jimenez Fishing and Trading Incorporated in Malabon City, where the crime allegedly took place. Despite the allegations that the Jimenez family was responsible for Ruby's death, they wanted her daughters to be reunited with her late mother before she was buried. But this did not happen. Ruby's daughters did not attend their mother's wake and burial. The eldest, 9 years old at the time, was quoted saying that she was already happy with her life and would rather focus on her studies. In July 2009, Third Jimenez spoke about the allegations against his family in an interview. According to him, Ruby cheated on him once and apparently had another affair after that. Their eldest daughter saw Ruby holding hands with another man. He mentioned that he forgave Ruby's infidelity and chose to ignore it, but they rarely talked anymore. Third suspects that the body found in the steel case wasn't Ruby. He insists that he and his father had a gut feeling that Ruby was still alive and had just left the country. Rochelle countered these statements. Although she confirmed that Ruby did cheat on her husband, it wasn't the reason she left. Rochelle explained that she had borrowed a pair of earrings from Ruby that Third was looking for. When Ruby couldn't give them to him immediately because they were with Rochelle, he repeatedly smashed her head against a cabinet, and their eldest saw this. Rochelle wondered why he had to violently hurt Ruby when they had many drivers who could retrieve the earrings from her. Ruby was afraid of her husband's violent tendencies, which is why she filed domestic abuse complaints against him. Unfortunately, like all the cases against Third so far, the charges did not stick. According to Montero's initial testimony, attorney Manuel Jimenez Jr. himself gave him orders in the BSJ conference room, wanting to ensure that the job would be clean and leave no traces of the crime. Eric Fernandez, who was Lopez's driver, Leonard Spike Descaso, Third's bodyguard, and Robert Obed Ponce, who who was a BSJ employee, were assigned to abduct Ruby from the Jimenez household. Montero was stationed at the BSJ compound, waiting for orders from Lope. Ruby arrived at the compound in a white van with Fernandez and Descalso, while her car was driven by Ponce, following right behind. She was gagged, handcuffed, and her feet were tied together. Following orders, Spike strangled Ruby to death with a rope. She was then transferred to a drum inside a steel case. Ponce prepared the cement and poured it all over her lifeless body, while Montero welded the cover on top. The next day, they transported the steel case in a truck to the Navotas fish port, transferred it to a tugboat, and dumped the body. They returned to the BSJ compound for a final meeting with Lope, who gave them 50,000 pesos each and instructed them to lay low until further notice. Montero heard Descalso on the phone saying, "Sir, it's done. Your problem is solved. We already threw her away, sir." When Montero asked who was on the other line, Spike answered, "Sir Third. He said he'd give me a bonus." A preliminary investigation was conducted, which resulted in the dismissal of the complaint against Third's participation in the crime. They claimed Montero's statement was merely hearsay and that there wasn't enough evidence against him. The Barrameda camp filed a motion for reconsideration, arguing that if probable cause was found against Lope and attorney Jimenez Jr., why wouldn't they charge Third? The murder was for him. No one else benefited more from the death of his estranged wife. According to Lope, Ruby was causing shame to the family with the custody fight over the kids, and she had to be dealt with. Rochelle also found a letter from Third when she searched Ruby's belongings. He had told his wife a year before her disappearance that he wanted them to separate. Rochelle speculated that was why he didn't spend Christmas and New Year of 2006 with Ruby and the kids. He was already with another woman. Ruby's father speculates that his daughter might have discovered the illegal dealings of the Jimenez family's businesses. He thinks Ruby might have told the Jimenezes that she would expose them if they didn't return the kids to her. And the Jimenezes would later be embroiled in oil smuggling and tax evasion charges. Rochelle says that Ruby was very obedient to the Jimenezes until Third started hurting her. It was the first time she fought back with a temporary protection order and a habeas corpus over her kids' custody. Rochelle points out that the crime took place in the Jimenez family's domain. The Malabon and Navotas areas were their turf. The location of the body cannot be denied. The company's right-hand man, Montero, knew exactly where to search. He even drew a map. But the Jimenezes argued that they were being framed, likely by their business enemies seeking to taint their name. The parricide case against Third gained traction with different government agencies finding probable cause. His father, attorney Jimenez Jr., denied the accusations against him when warrants of arrest were issued. He surrendered to the police but soon admitted himself to a hospital, claiming he couldn't be transferred anywhere else due to his health condition. A few months later, reports circulated that he was living comfortably in the Philippine Heart Center. Lope Jimenez denied any involvement. He claimed he didn't know Ruby personally, since his relationship with his brother and nephew had been estranged since October 2005. He remained at large, along with his driver, Eric Fernandez. Robert Ponce was arrested in November 2012 after 2 years of hiding in Isabela province. He admitted he was part of the group that murdered Ruby Rose, but stressed that he had nothing to do with the killing itself, only assisting the others in placing the victim's body in a drum and filling it with concrete. He said he received a monthly allowance from the Jimenez family to keep out of sight. In an interview, Rochelle said she forgave the suspect-turned-state witness, Montero. Instead of feeling anger, she hugged him and thanked him for bringing Ruby back to the family. She said he asked for the Barrameda's family's forgiveness and showed remorse for what he did. It took him so long to come forward because he didn't know who to trust. The Jimenez family was very influential, and he didn't know how to reach the Barramedas without interference from the police and other authorities under the Jimenez clan's thumb. He feared for his life and his family's as well. Despite the risk, he came forward, giving hope to the grieving family. And that is why it came as a shock to the Barramedas in February 2013 when they found out he recanted his testimony, and a month later, he disappeared. CCTV footage showed Montero leaving without any police officer stopping him. They did nothing as the main witness in a highly controversial case left their premises. Rochelle speculates that the police were paid to let someone so valuable, with a target on his back, leave just like that. The Barrameda's hope was crushed. They were at their wits' end, losing such an integral part of the case. They no longer believed it will be possible to move the case forward, but hoped at the very least for the police officers to answer for their gross negligence. Montero also recanted his testimony in a handwritten statement filed before the court, weeks later escaping from witness protection. He wrote that his accusations against the suspects were lies and fabricated, claiming he was ordered by someone to issue his affidavits implicating the 5 accused. The court expunged Montero's testimony from the records because he did not complete his direct and cross-examination. Montero did not show up in court to finish his testimony. As a result, all other evidence from the Steele case was removed from the exhibits because Montero could not corroborate it. And due to this, Judge Larita of the Malabon court allowed attorney Jimenez Jr., Descalso, and Ponce to post bail. Without Montero's testimony, the Malabon court found there was insufficient evidence to continue the murder trial. On August 15, 2015, the case was dismissed. The Barrameda family was devastated. They would be starting over again after the case was dismissed, even without subjecting Third to an arraignment or issuing an arrest warrant against him. The Barrameda family contested the dismissal of the parricide case, accusing the judge of bias in favor of the accused. Ruby's family pointed out that the Justice Department's finding of probable cause to file a parricide charge against Third had been affirmed by the Office of the President, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court. Therefore, they argued the judge was ignoring 4 government agencies in issuing his ruling. Rochelle noted that the judge had only recently been assigned as acting presiding judge, but had quickly decided to dismiss the cases against the Jimenezes and others. Despite Montero's disappearance from police custody, Ruby's father remains hopeful that Montero will come around. He said, "We're not sure if you escaped or were allowed to escape, but we hope that your conscience will convince you to do the right thing." The case was given to a new judge, Judge Docena of the Malabon Regional Trial Court, who denied the prosecution's motion for reconsideration to reverse Judge Larita's decision. Judge Docena reiterated Larita's ruling that the court could not rely solely on the sworn statement of former witness Montero linking the Jimenezes to the murder of Ruby Rose Barrameda. He also granted Lope Jimenez and Eric Fernandez motion to cancel their arrest warrants, effectively dismissing the murder charges against them. All the accused were acquitted. The Jimenez family maintains their innocence, insisting they had no involvement in Ruby's death. They even demand an apology from the public for the accusations that tarnished their family's name. In their quest for justice that seems so elusive, the Barrameda family vows not to give up. They will do everything to fight for Ruby Rose. Their only wish is that the public won't forget her story. To this day, the Barramedas are still awaiting the return of Montero, if he is still alive. Despite all the heartache and endless legal battles, the Barrameda family hasn't given up their fight for justice for Ruby Rose. Their strength shows just how much they love her and how determined they are to see those responsible held accountable. Our heartfelt condolences go out to them. They've been through so much pain and loss. We hope justice will eventually be served, bringing some peace to Ruby Rose's memory and to her family. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.